Hey, everybody, welcome to On My Mind Monday, the day where I talk about what's on my mind. I do this, of course, every Monday. Today being February the 28th, the very last day of February this year. No leap year this year. So we're going to talk about what's on my mind on this last day of February. Can you imagine? 2 months already. We are 1/6 into 2022 already. So the year is flying by. We're moving very quickly, full steam ahead. Of course, when you talk about what's on my mind, I think we know what's on everybody's mind right now, and that we are going to talk about it. We are not going to leave that uncovered. But first, have you ever, looked at something and thought, "Wow, I am like in a commercial. I feel like I'm in an ad." Okay. This is the way I found myself over the weekend. So, over the weekend, Friday night, I was starting to have the sinus pressure and sniffles and that kind of thing. And I was at a point where I thought, gosh, I wasn't able to sleep. I was dragging. There was not an hour that went by throughout the night where I didn't see the clock at some point. So it's not saying that I didn't sleep for more than an hour at any point, but if so, it wasn't very long and that. So that's Friday. So what do I decide to do? What do I decide to do? I decide on Saturday I need to sleep. I need to get some actual rest. I worked out. I did all the things that I normally do on Saturday, but I thought I'm going to need to get some actual rest. So I took some Nyquil. And actually, it wasn't even real Nyquil, okay? It was Kroger brand Nyquil. So it wasn't even the real thing, but still felt like I was in a commercial because I crashed out on Saturday night into Sunday to the point where I was just completely beat, but I could at least breathe well enough, and my sinuses didn't hurt, and my headache was gone, at least for the night, and I was able to rest. And it was just really weird as I thought about it, because I felt like I was the guy in that old NyQuil commercial, that's laying there, and can't get to sleep, and then, he takes the NyQuil, and then he can. It's just weird. Okay, so again, I know that NyQuil isn't for everybody. Some people really hate it because it just stays with you. In fact, I know it did for me on Sunday. It kind of stayed with me a little bit longer than what I would have liked. But that said, at least I was able to get a good night's sleep. So again, this is not an ad for NyQuil because it wasn't even real NyQuil I was taking, but I felt myself like in an ad, as part of like an ad. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. I don't know why it struck me that way, but that's what it did. So anyway, there's that. So that was just one thing that kind of was on my mind that I thought was a little odd, a little strange and different. But okay, let's talk about, I don't think it's even an elephant in the room. What is everybody talking about? What is everybody thinking about right now? And that is the situation in Ukraine. Okay, we're going to call it a situation in Ukraine, but let's just be honest about what we're seeing here. And that is, this is a Russian invasion. This is a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is not something that we're going to sugarcoat and whitewash and call it something else. I've seen some news organizations call it the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or this isn't a Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is a Russian invasion that was commanded by their leader, Vladimir Putin. And in fact, it seems that even the Russian people, by and large, aren't even on board with this from what we're seeing. It's hard to know really, to really get a pulse for that kind of thing. It's not like we can go and poll them and that they're going to actually be able to give, their honest opinion on something like this. But that said, we're going to be straight. We're going to call it what it is. So how in the world are we getting to this point? I mean, we've got this invasion in Europe, the first major land incursion in Europe since what, World War II? This is insanity. This is insanity. And we got there because of weakness on the parts of a whole lot of folks. Germany decided, oh, hey, we don't want to be all in militarily. And in fact, we really want to buy more Russian oil, right? That's part of what we're into. Here in other parts of Europe, they kind of tiptoed around the Russians, trying not to incur Vladimir Putin's wrath or whatever. And even here in the States, we have been terrible. Instead of adopting an energy policy, which we could easily do here in the United States, we could easily have an energy policy which would mean that we had to import no Russian oil, no foreign oil of any kind. We could have been purely self-sufficient and, in fact, exporting to other nations. Okay, exporting to other nations. But because we haven't done that, we find ourselves weaker in the face of aggression like this. I really don't think that anybody, the Ukrainians included, by the way, nobody thought that Putin was actually gonna do this. And here we are. And here we are. So that's one thing that we're looking at here. So, a signed piece of paper is good, right? We want to live by the rule of law. The rule of law is super important. You want that signed piece of paper on a treaty. Those things are important. But see, a signed piece of paper is only going to be as good as you have the power to back it up. Okay? We're talking about bad men with big guns. If you don't have that to back it up, if you don't have a threat to back it up, then bad actors are going to act badly, right? They're going to do that. Years ago, I was in a negotiation training for the place that I worked, and one of the things that they did was they had a game in which you had cards that had X's and you had cards that had Y's, right? And the folks that had the X card, those were kind of the belligerent negotiator. They're the ones that wanted to take all. They're the ones that were not cooperative, right? Whereas the Y card, those were the cooperatives. And, you could, as long as everybody was playing that Y card, everybody was cooperating. It was great until somebody threw an X. But here's one of the things that we learned. You cannot be a Y card player in an X card game, right? You can't do it, because if you do, they're going to continue to throw X's while you throw Y's, and you are going to lose every single time, which is why I think it's very important that the world has really turned against Putin in ways that he could not have imagined, I don't think. I think that the world has shown him we're not going for what you're doing. We are not buying your stories, first of all. And I've seen some people actually on social media try to make the case for for the Russians in different ways, or they have they've said certain things, or, oh, hey, did you know that there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and all those kinds of things, as though that somehow made it okay to do what the Russians are doing. So this is going to be really important, and I'm going to tell you why. Obviously, because of innocent men, women, and children in the nation of Ukraine that are suffering right now because of this Russian invasion, but it's also going to be important for the future. What is the future going to hold? It's going to be important for other potentially bad actors like the communist Chinese, as they are looking with their intentions toward Taiwan, perhaps. In fact, I was just talking the other day with a foreign exchange student from China who's been in the States for several years now, good friend of my kids. We love having him around whenever he's around, and he's now living in Florida, and he was able to visit. And one of the things that he was saying, he was always taught, and it was just his opinion because it was the way he was always taught, that Taiwan is really just part of China, and that's the way it should be, and all that kind of thing. And that's the way that they are taught there, and not really realizing that there's maybe another side to the story from those on the outside. Well, I'm going to tell you what, the communist Chinese are going to be looking at how the world reacts right now with respect to Russia. And if Russia is allowed to get an inch that they can take a mile, the Chinese are going to learn from that. right? They're going to learn from that. And I think that they are going to act accordingly. So I think it's very important that not only do we continue to smack Putin on the nose and tell him this is not acceptable, we will not accept what you're trying to do, but to continue to do so that it lets other potentially bad actors know that they're not going to get away with this. Okay, so that's going to be really important, and we're seeing just important responses, even by the Swiss. The Swiss typically have prided themselves on we are super neutral, we're not going to take any action. Well, they've taken some banking actions, right? That's something that they've done. The Swedes, even who are typically trying to be super neutral, they're taking action. The Finns are trying to take action. And even the Germans, who we begged them for years to up the amount of their GDP that they were going to spend on defense, and they hemmed and hawed and ignored us and said, no, we're not going to do that. And we don't want to build up militarily and all that kind of thing, as though the rest of Europe and the United States were just going to cover all that, right? Well, Olaf has come in, right? And he's basically made decisions. You know what? We really need to invest in our defense. So that has become super important for them now. So we're seeing responses, and we're seeing how this conflict actually is kind of reshaping the way that the world does things. And it can be for some of the positive things that we've seen. We've seen a dramatic amount of nobility from the Ukrainian people. Their president, Zelensky, many thought, okay, this is a likable guy, but he's an ex-comedian. We don't really know what he's made of. I think Putin probably thought, hey, he's going to fold. He's not going to really do a whole lot. If I do this, he'll probably find a way to negotiate his way out or do whatever. Instead, this is a man who has been communicating with his people and telling them, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, the United States offered him a plane out of Ukraine, and he said, you know what? I need ammo. I don't need a ride. I need ammo. I'm fighting for my people, and this is super huge news. Another thing that's been interesting to me, because anybody who knows me, I am a huge boxing guy. Boxing is by far my favorite sport. As much as I love my Steelers and all that, boxing is my game, right? So I really love it, and I found it interesting that there are so many figures from the world of boxing who are from Ukraine. And these are people who could easily have taken their millions and stayed in safer places like the UK or the United States. And hey, they had training for big fights that are supposed to come up in the spring, some of them. The former lightweight champion of the world, three division champion Vasyl Lomachenko has now gone back to his hometown to join the forces there to fight. Former heavyweight champions Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko, who's actually the mayor of Kiev, they are staying back to fight. They have signed up. They have their weapons. They are leading the charge. And even the heavyweight champion of the world himself, Alexander Usyk, has taken up the fight against the Russian invasion. This is a guy who is supposed to have a multi-million-dollar fight against Anthony Joshua in the spring, the former champion. And instead of preparing for that fight and getting ready for a multi-million-dollar payday, he has instead turned around and gone back toward danger. Okay, and it's crazy to me because, of course, I came up at a time when the heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, these were, the big names, and they were some of the most respected sportsmen on the planet. And right now, the reigning and defending heavyweight champion of the world is defending his nation instead of behind gloves, behind a gun, and doing his part alongside his countrymen to repel this Russian invasion, and hardly anybody knows about it. So I think it's pretty crazy to see that, and that's something that's just been kind of blowing my mind. You know, can you imagine if somebody like Evander Holyfield or Lennox Lewis were forced into something like this? It would have been major news, huge story. But now, unfortunately, most people don't even know who the heavyweight champion of the world is. So, for the record, the heavyweight champion of the world is Alexander Usyk of Ukraine. Just won the title last fall in an amazing fight against Anthony Joshua. And instead of defending his title, he's defending his nation. And that is what's on my mind on this Monday, February the 28th. Take care, everybody. I will look forward to seeing you next week. Godspeed. Thanks.